Hello, and welcome to the North Texas Teen Book Festival, coming to you virtually from Irving, Texas. We hope you've been enjoying our day. It's the end of the world as we know it panel. I'll pause to let you sing the rest of that line. And today we are joined by Kristen Kishore, Cass Morgan, Garth Nix, Daniel Page, and Sabaa Tahir. So what we're going to do is I will ask each author an individual question, and we will go into some questions that have been submitted by local teams. But first, I would ask that everybody introduce themselves. And so we will start with Kristen, because you're the first person I see.
Well, I'm Kristen Kishore, and I'm the author of the Graceling Realm books and also Jane Unlimited. And I most recently released Winterkeep, which is the fourth book in the Graceling Realm series. All the books in the Graceling Realm series are standalone books, but they're all interconnected. They have interconnected characters. So just very briefly, Winterkeep is told from 5 perspectives. 3 of them are human. 1 of them is a blue fox who's telepathic. And 1 of them is a telepathic sea monster who lives at the bottom of the ocean and just wishes everybody would leave her alone. And it's full of political intrigue and romance and a lot of family dynamics and heartbreak and environmental crises and redemption. And just it's pretty packed full of a lot of stuff. And yeah, that's my view.
Thank you. Garth, you can go next.
Hi, I'm Garth Nix. I'm coming to you from the future in Sydney, Australia, where it's almost a day later than everybody else back in the US. I've written many books, mostly fantasy and science fiction, including the Old Kingdom series, the Keys to the Kingdom series, lots of others. My most recent book is The Left-Handed Booksellers of London. And in terms of the end of the world, I've written only one post-apocalyptic dystopian novel, which is Shade's Children, going all the way back to 1997. But it hangs around like all good end of the world books. And I'm very pleased to be here virtually in Texas.
Thank you so much. And Sabaa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Sarah. My name is Sabaa Tahir, and I'm the author of the Ember in the Ashes series. And my most recent book is Sky Beyond the Storm, and it came out in December.
And we also have Cass Morgan and Daniel Page. You have co-written a book, so I'm going to ask you to both introduce yourselves together.
I'm Cass Morgan. I'm the author of the 100 series, which was the inspiration for the CW show of the same name. And most recently, I'm the co-author of The Ravens with Danielle Page, which is about a sorority of witches in Savannah, Georgia. And we had so much fun writing it together, and we're excited to talk about it.
And I'm Danielle Page, and I wrote the Dorothy Must Die series, which is also kind of post-apocalyptic, but Oz. And just got to write The Ravens and now The Monarchs with Cass, and we're so excited to bring you our sorority witches.
Okay, so my first question is for Sabaa. I read in an interview where you said that since you were a child, you've asked yourself a question. How do we hold on to hope in the midst of the suffering, pain, and struggling the world throws at us? How did you go about answering that question across the Ember series, and how do you think teen readers can use those answers to that question in their own life?
So when I was writing Ember, I thought a lot about sort of this weird intersection that people find themselves at between hope and despair. And I especially thought about the idea of choice and how it often feels like there is no choice in that space. If things are really bad, you just feel despair and you can't help it. But I think that choice is actually being presented to us constantly. So something terrible can happen and you can feel utter despair, but you can also come out of that. And you can also find your way out of that. You can get help out of that. And it doesn't last forever, hopefully. So that is what I tried to address in my books. Just this idea that if we do feel despair, if we do go through difficult things, that doesn't mean that there's not hope. That just means that maybe the road is a little bit harder than we would want it to be. And, I would hope, my own life, I have just tried to kind of learn what I can from, whatever awful experiences that all of us go through. And so that's what I tried to kind of demonstrate in the books as much as I could, without being unrealistic, because I also think that there are times where everything is just awful. And not acknowledging that is actually harmful. I think we've actually really seen that during COVID, like people who are just sort of like going on as before and they're like, everything is great. It's like, oh, I think maybe you're a little deranged. So, so yeah, that's generally, I think, how I've tried to address that in the book.
Thank you. And the next question is for Kristen. Your heroines are often coming to terms with how they are different from what is expected from them in their relationships, in their family, and society as a whole. Katza fights both the stereotype of what is feminine and who killers are assumed to be. This type of expectation against reality friction continues with Fire and Bitterblue and their journeys to self-confidence in who they are and take the length of the novels. And now in Winterkeep, we also see Lavicia questioning how she fits in. Why do you find writing these journeys so compelling?
Yeah, I love that you called out that particular aspect of what I do with character, because I hadn't actually noticed that it's a theme with each of my women until you brought that up. But I think that for me, my books are always very character driven. So it's very, very much about, okay, who is this person really? And while I will have a plot that I've set up and I will be working toward that plot as I'm writing, what's more important is what the characters would actually do. So at every moment I'm asking myself, okay, what would they actually say here? What would they actually do here? And one of the ways to figure out who your characters are and what they would do is to, put them in situations of conflict. And I think one of the most classic conflicts just for human beings is this conflict of, okay, society is telling me I'm this, my parents are telling me I'm this, that this is my responsibility, this is who I am, but who am I actually? How do those expectations make me feel? And if they're making me feel horrible, if they're making me feel self-destructive, or if they're making me feel like in despair, what does that say? What does that suggest? Who am I actually? I just feel like that is a person growing up and learning to decide for themselves who they are rather than fall in line with expectations. It's just a fascinating journey for me to watch, probably because, like I think most people, I encountered a lot of conflict in terms of expectations growing up. I saw a lot of it around me. I just think I think if you have a character, and in my case, it's almost always a young woman who is trying to understand and become something bigger and become a person who can live a life that they will find tolerable, but also invigorating, worth living. It's just a really productive journey to send your character down, to surround them by people who have the wrong expectations for them.
Thank you for that. Next question is for Cass and Danielle. There's a saying, with great power comes great responsibility. I can't say that without kind of giggling a little bit. So in The Ravens, we learn that Capa Ronnu is home to one of the most powerful coven of witches. And it seems as if with that much power, it would be easy to use it for personal gain or to harm others. How is that addressed in the book? And how do the Ravens learn to wield their power responsibly?
Danielle, do you want to start us off?
Can you do it?
Yeah, that is such a great question. I think, that struggle is something all the characters deal with, and I think it's sort of a universal trope for a reason. Humans are flawed, and we, are fundamentally caring, but when we have this type of power, of course, sometimes of our baser instincts come into play. But the way I think we wanted to explore that in The Ravens, so Danielle came to me with the idea, and she came up with the idea of a book about sorority witches and wanted a co-author, which was just like the greatest gift an author can receive, to be invited to join this magical world that is already sort of fleshed out. And we were both really excited about the idea of sort of playing with the themes of sisterhood and magic, and the idea that these really powerful women aren't necessarily in competition with each other. Because we think about witches traditionally as outsiders, as marginalized people, as women who have been shunned from society because their power is seen as a threat. So we both were really sort of seduced by the idea of witches as the consummate insiders, as belonging to the sorority that everyone wants to be a part of. And what I think is sort of compelling about this world that we created and that Danielle sort of had been thinking about for a long time is the idea that these single witches are powerful. They all have magic, they all have skills, but there are certain spells that they can only perform when the full coven is together. And sort of one of the biggest takeaways from the book is that a single witch is powerful, but a coven is unstoppable. And so I think that's where it's sort of like good triumphs over evil, because when you are thinking about the greater good, when you have to have your sisters by your side to perform magic, it's always going to be in service of something greater than yourself.
And I think that Cass said that so much better than I would have said it. So I'm going to interpret that as our answer. And I just wanted to say for all the kids out there, I know you guys have been through so much with everything that's happened in Texas, and we all stand with you. And I just want to say that.
We're sending our magic your way. Our coven is with you.
Well, thank you very much for that. So our next question is for Garth. So in the Left-Handed Booksellers of London, it takes place in an alternate 1980s London. There are a lot of mentions of events, people, and items from that time. And given that this book is written for an audience that was born way before the events of the 80s, are these references made for yourself, for an older audience that might be reading the book? Or are you trying to stump a younger audience and maybe make them stop reading for a moment and do a little research to learn more about England in the 80s?
Well, definitely not the last. I don't want to direct anyone to do research about anything from reading my books. They're there for me, essentially. I mean, I write books for myself, and I write books that I want to read now and that I would have liked to have read when I was at different ages, depending on what the book is. So they're written for different versions of myself, I guess. I hope that most of the references are things that, if it piques the reader's interest and they can look them up, they can easily research them. They can look at things on YouTube or Wikipedia or whatever if they want to. But I actually don't think you need to know the cultural references to enjoy the story, or any other aspect. So I guess the main reason is they're there because the story is for me, and then I just hope that other people will like it as well. And I also think they add small details, help build a world, whether it's a fantasy world or it's one derived from the real world. And small details help you create that illusion. And if you're using the real world, then taking the small details from there, helps it all work. And for those who do know, and either they directly experienced it or they just have knowledge of, for whatever reason, watching television, old shows or whatever, that helps sustain that illusion. Though I did mess with things, and I gender swapped TV shows and did other things like that. And there is a disclaimer in the front of the book that says, maybe you lived in London in 1983, but it's not that London. I also changed some of the history as well, because I wanted to make that United Kingdom a more diverse and a more equitable place than it actually was in 1983. But the main reason it's 1983 is that's when I first went to London from Australia, and my memories of that time and that experience were very strong, and it just seemed right to set the story in that period, but with some changes.
Okay, thank you for that. So we have, like I said before, we've had local students submit some questions. So we will get into that. And this is for everybody. So it's just not directed at anybody in particular. One of them might be. But just jump in whenever you want to. So our first question comes from Nikki from Memorial Middle School. And she asked, what is something cool about being an author that no one would guess knowing about?
I think people don't know just the sheer amount of like chocolate that we consume on deadline, like every kind, and sort of constantly as both a bribe to ourselves, but also as a reward. So I think that's one thing that's really cool. The other thing I think people don't know about is that you get to read your friends' books early, and that's like the best thing ever because a lot of these books are things that other people are waiting for, and it's like I take great glee in gloating over the fact that like I get to read my beta readers' books early, and like they won't be out for a year because they're all very talented people. I think that's pretty cool.
I think that one of the things that's coolest is kind of follows off of what Garth said, which is that, I mean, I also write my books for myself, and it is such a gift to be able to be your own boss and spend your time making up whatever you want. It is just the biggest, most unbelievable gift that I will never tire of. And the other thing I really love is I'm a person who loves like blank journals and notebooks and Post-it notes and like all the supplies. I just collect all the different colors, all the different options. And also I collect a lot of books. I read a lot of books. And when you're a writer, all of that stuff is tax deductible. So you feel like you have this excuse to buy these expensive journals and these expensive books because you convince yourself it's free money. I mean, it's not really, it's this little thing you do in your head, but it's
also research trips.
Oh my goodness.
Trips are great.
And movie tickets.
right, movie tickets, every movie you go to. So I do have to like go to my tax person now and then and be like, okay, am I pushing it a little too far here? And she'll tell me if I am, because I don't want to get audited. But
the only time mine said no is when I asked if I could write off my outfits, and she's like, "Oh, absolutely not. No, no, no."
There may be variations in Australia. I asked my accountant that, and he said, if you get your name embroidered across every shirt and coat, then you can deduct it, and otherwise not. So I thought, yeah, maybe not. Yeah, that might be going too far. Having my name embroidered.
You get like a cape that just is
your signature look.
Right.
Yes, there's all kinds of signature looks that I could go for. I'm not one of the more flamboyant authors. I do know some authors who have signature looks, and they work fantastically well for them. But
have any of you ever? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm wondering if anyone's ever done an event with Gail Carriger, because she gets into her Victoria.
I have never been so lucky as to do that.
And I wonder if she is ever allowed to deduct any of that stuff.
Well, actually, that would be deductible, I'm sure. I mean,
it's a costume.
The full Regency outfit. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, jumping off of that, I'm sorry.
No, go.
I was just gonna say I guess it shouldn't be unexpected. I should have saw this coming, but my favorite part has been getting to meet other authors. You think of writing as so solitary, but so much of my life, pre-pandemic was going to festivals. Like I have been doing this for a long time and I'm still starstruck by the names up on this screen. Like if we were in person, I would be acting so weird right now. So I'm sort of glad that I'm remote, so I'm not sort of fangirling off of everyone. But yeah, that was something that sort of came as a wonderful surprise. The friends I made and the authors I got to admire and then become friends with.
Yeah, I'm going to jump on that, what Cass is saying, because getting to meet all of you, obviously, but I went to the Key West Literary Festival a couple of years ago and I got to meet Judy Blume, and that was just the best thing ever. And it was in her bookstore and she was like stocking my book and it was amazing. And I think just getting to meet those people that you've looked up to and read when you were a kid is just incredible. And also getting to meet kids who are reading you is just I think that's a big secret joy. I never imagined kids reading what I wrote, and and to have any kind of effect on them like authors had on me just means the world to me.
Yeah.
I was going to say something very similar in that this has happened sort of more to me in the last decade or so, where young beginning writers meet me and say they read my books growing up and my books influenced them. And of course I got to do the same thing to many authors, and when I was lucky I got to meet them, like I met Susan Cooper at an ALA and got her to sign my copy of The Dark is Rising. And I got to drink whiskey with Diana Wynne Jones in Edinburgh many years ago. And I like that aspect of that. We're in this big family tree, and there's these amazing authors who influenced me and were incredibly important to me growing up, and incredibly important to my writing. And I got to meet some of them, not enough of them. And then, later on, after 30 years of being published, now I'm meeting authors and something of the same sort of things going on. Though I did meet one in an elevator at an American conference who looked at my name badge and said, "Garth Nix, I thought you were dead." I was like, "Why did you think I was dead?" I said, because everybody else I was reading growing up, they're all dead. So why wouldn't you be? I thought, well, that's it's logical.
And very honest.
Yeah, but at least I wasn't dead, so that was good.
Garth, the next time I corner you in a hotel elevator, I have to hear about drinking whiskey with Diana Wynne Jones. That just sounds like peaking.
Yeah, she could see auras. Well, she could see auras after she'd had a couple of whiskeys, or she felt free to mention it to me, and it was very, very interesting. And I was very pleased that she felt that I had a good aura. She explained my aura to me. Unfortunately, I can't actually remember the details, possibly because of the whiskey, which I didn't used to drink it back in those days. So I used to drink, but not whiskey. But it was a tremendous. I've been a great fan of her since I was a very, very young child. So that was a tremendous opportunity.
Garth, I remember having drinks with you after I think one of my very first book events, and it was such a treat. So
good.
It's kind of a nice full circle.
Excellent. Good. Yeah, gets passed along, doesn't it? Yeah.
Okay, so our next question comes to us from Alina, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, from Jasper High School. And they ask, what was the strangest situation where you were struck by inspiration?
I think inspiration comes all the time. There's a sort of popular conception that there's one bolt of inspiration and that supplies everything you need for an entire book. But I think that can happen, but it's less common. And it's different for everybody, of course. And I'm curious to hear what everybody else says. But I think most books are actually made up of lots of bigger and lesser inspirations that come along the way, and they can occur at any time. They can be walking the dog, or getting on the bus, or lying in bed just as you wake up. There's all kinds of things, or seeing something happen, or you read some curious fact and it sparks off Wikipedia. Quite often the sort of random reading of Wikipedia gives me an idea for something. So for me, there's lots and lots of little inspirations, and they come from all kinds of things all the time.
Yeah, it's about paying attention, just paying attention to what happens around you. I did go on one very unusual trip that kind of gave me more inspiration than any other trip I've ever gone on, which might be an interesting example. I did an artist residency on a tall ship in the Arctic, and I was sailing around the Arctic, around Svalbard, which is in the a little island in the Arctic Circle, for 2 weeks, and doing things like climbing the mast and helping raise the sails. And my next book is basically, it all takes place there. My main character learns to climb the mast. Basically everything I did, she does. So occasionally you travel, for me, often will give me ideas, and then occasionally you get something really special that sets off some unusual plot point or train of thought.
That is so cool.
You can do it. This is artist residency. Well, it's not, of course, it's not happening right now, but every summer and fall, you apply for it, and you spend that time. You live on the ship. It's the best. It's one of the top 3 things I've ever done in my life.
That sounds incredible. I think for me, it's like you're taking a walk, you're taking a shower, you see the fountain in Central Park. Like, it's like it could be anything that you see or you hear, and it just, something sparks. And sometimes I think my favorite part about writing stories is when the story starts to speak to you, when you start having those internal moments instead of just the external things.
Yeah, I actually have gotten a lot of ideas just watching my kids from when they were very young, like feeding them like 3 in the morning just until later. And I think it's because, which is a little strange because my books are so violent, but I think it's because they have this sort of weird, like visceral kind of honesty. You know, they're kids, like especially when they're very young, there's no deception really. I mean, if they lie, it's like, I didn't take that cookie, then you can tell, right? But there was something about watching them and how they interacted with each other and how they interacted with me and how they played alone. That kind of helped me understand like the human spirit a little bit. And I found that to be very useful and sort of looking for inspiration. And I think especially when you're like a new parent, you do end up really just spending a lot of time with your kids. Like you're not really getting out, you're not, you're not doing other stuff. So maybe I was like a little desperate for inspiration. Just was like, I'll take it where I can get it.
And then Cass actually went to Savannah, which is where our book took place. So, and I went to Charleston, and it has the same feel. And I think that like place is definitely, like what Kristen said, it makes such a difference.
Absolutely. I sometimes have trouble coming up with book ideas, or rather, I have trouble committing to them. It's like, I like to date book ideas and like flirt with them, but then when it comes time to decide which one you want to marry and like spend the next like 4 years of your life with, it's very scary. So I was very grateful when Danielle came up with the idea for my next series. Yeah, when she proposed. But for me, it's sort of about the smaller moments of inspiration. So I have a day job. I'm a book editor, and it's really hard for me to switch from like work mode to writing mode at nights and on the weekends. And so for me, I find inspiration when I find that perfect song for each scene, and I generally listen to it on repeat as I write. And it gets to the point where I hear those opening chords, and I'm really pulled into the world. And so I get sort of like emotional inspiration in the same way some of the other authors were saying. Like when I was working on The 100, I was having trouble connecting to this idea of self-sacrifice. Like, of course, like we all have people we love who we would die for, but I was having trouble like getting into that headspace. And I was listening to that Death Cab for Cutie song, I'll Follow You Into the Dark, over and over. And it really put me in that space where it's like, what does it feel like to know that someone is going somewhere where they might not return from, and what would it take for you to go there with them? And I sort of, so I don't have those like aha light bulb moments, but I have those sort of choir moments throughout the day where something happened and you feel something you didn't expect to feel before, and then hopefully you can put it on the page.
Okay. We've got an answer from everybody, correct? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So our next question is from Amy, and she is from Lady Bird Johnson Middle School. And she asked, why and how do you make decisions to kill off characters? I'm looking at you, Saba.
Me too.
Break my heart.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I first of all, I get very sad when I kill off characters too. So I don't, even though I tease my readers when I'm on social media, I actually don't like sit in my study like cackling and like petting my cat like as I kill off characters. Like I do really feel that pain, but I decide to kill off characters when I feel like the story demands it, which is, it sounds like a cop out answer, but I'll try to explain. The world of Ember is really violent, and I've done a lot of research into sort of societies like that, including current ones that are in our world right now. And there are just times where there's just no way, like statistically, that everybody is going to make it out. It's just not going to happen. And so at that point, I have to ask myself, like, okay, like, who's like the baby antelope of the bunch? Like, who's the one who's going to go down, like, when the lion's chasing after him? So it's a sort of a terrible thing to think, and I also try to think a lot about where people's weaknesses are, and maybe how sometimes those weaknesses can lead to these decisions that end up leading to unchangeable consequences like death. So I really do think it through. I don't just kill characters because I'm like, I feel like murdering someone on paper today. I did have a character who I had very much toyed with killing. I can't say who it is, but it was in the fourth book, and my mother actually like got into it with me and was like, don't you dare. Like, don't you dare kill that character. I will be so upset with you. I will never make you paratha again. I will never make you like curry again. Like, never. And that was a really serious start because my mom's food is really good. So I was like, okay, I won't do it. So there are ways to stop it. You just have to offer me unending Pakistani food. I'll consider
Okay,
your request.
I'll figure out how to cook that. I'll just send it to you from Texas. Be like, please don't.
I'm gonna
Okay.
do it. Let's do it.
Anyone else?
Cats kill people. Cats, I know you kill people.
I know Kristen's killed some people.
In her stories?
Yeah. I mean,
Yes, in stories.
I'm hesitating to speak because it's sort of, I think Saba explained it. Like you know, you do it because you have to do it because the plot requires it, the reality of the situation requires it. I mean, part of what I'm trying to do is I write fantasy, but I'm writing about the real world, and terrible, terrible, terrible stuff happens in the real world. So, you know,
For the story to feel real, it has to have consequence, and death is a big one of the biggest consequences. So, I mean, if you didn't kill the characters, I'm sure readers would feel shortchanged. It would just pull the whole edifice down. So, and I think, you know, readers often, what sort of idea of killing characters, I think, is often confused by readers who think it's a sort of arbitrary. Oh, I feel like killing them, like Saba said. You know, like, oh, you just get in a mood to kill someone. That's not actually what happens at all. It's part of the careful construction of the story and what the emotional truth and the reality of the story demands. And I mean, when characters of mine die, I weep as I'm writing it often, because if I don't feel it, I don't think the reader will feel it either. So it's not like I want to do that, or I'm just sort of arbitrarily doing so. It's just part of the requirement of making a story work.
Yeah, I would agree with Garth and with Saba. I wrote a book called Dorothy Must Die, so there had to be some consequences in that series, and but Dorothy doesn't actually die. And I feel like in another series that I did, Stealing Snow, I had planned on killing a certain character, and from the it was in my outline, I was sure of it, and I kept writing and rewriting the same scene, and it just didn't make sense. And I realized that I didn't have the right reason for it, and I actually saved a character. So I think it has to be there in the story and the character for it to make sense, and the story has to tell you to do it.
Yeah, I agree. And I am also now remembering, since you said that, Danielle, I'm remembering moments when it's my plan for this character to live, or more often for this character to die, and I get there and I realize, oh no, I can't. This isn't actually what happens here. It unbalances the story too much, or actually now I have a new idea about where I'm going with this character. So just kind of letting the book try to tell you what it needs, I guess.
That's such an interesting point, because
ask you guys a random question about this particular topic. The question is, like, when you kill a character, do you ever like feel guilty about it for a few days afterward, like where you just kind of feel bad, or are you like, okay, the story demanded it, I'm moving on?
I feel bad when I kill a character. I do.
I don't feel guilty. I often feel sad, but I don't feel guilty because, you know, that is the story. And if I've done it right, it's as if it's actually happened somewhere, and I've just worked out how to tell it. So if I've done it right, and if it feels real, so that's what happened. And so it's not, in a way, I mean, maybe that's sort of rationalization of what I've done, but I do often feel sad. And in fact, I can go, you know, I still feel sad if I go back and reread some of the things like that, though I try and avoid rereading my own work as much as possible. But you know, after the endless revisions and so on. But you know, years later, if you're particularly writing a series where you have to go back and remind yourself of what you've written, and quite often I still feel that same emotion, which to me I think indicates that I actually did get it right at the time. And if I don't feel it, then I didn't do it well enough. I didn't write it well enough.
I'm sorry, I think somebody else was about to start talking as well.
I think Cass?
Oh, I mean, everyone has said it so well. I don't really have much to add, but I don't feel that guilty. I mean, the 100 is a bloodbath, but I feel, totally guilt-free because the violence is a product of the world the adult characters created, and the teens are trying to right those wrongs. So of course people have to die, or else it won't feel that serious or stakeful. But I don't get sad when I kill characters, but I feel an immense responsibility to show the grieving process in some way. One of my pet peeves as a reader or as a film viewer is when someone dies and they shed the single tear and then they go back to like fighting the war and like there's never a moment. And I like, even when you're trying to save the world and fight the bad guys and take down the evil government, like you still are going to process that loss in some way. So sort of thinking about the different ways grief manifests in different situations for different type of characters is a lot of responsibility. So I don't get sad, but I feel sort of the pressure to do it well.
Yeah, my first job was in soaps, and the producers always said that we had to make sure it's a good death, wherein you actually get to see the whole like week of everyone mourning. Like you have to have the payoff, and I feel like there's something there. Like I think you have to. I think I still do that when I write.
So I have one more question, and hopefully the powers that be at North Texas Teen Book Festival won't get upset with me for asking one more question. But this question was submitted from Hidia, and she is from Jasper High School. And they ask, what inspires you to come up with the worlds in your novels that are similar yet non-repetitive with their characteristics and storyline?
These are such great questions.
This one was deep.
I'll start. For me, it's selfish. I just get bored. So I had a lot of fun writing the 100 books, which are set in a space station that's, orbiting Earth, and then sort of a post-apocalyptic version of Earth. But then like there just weren't good outfits. Everyone is running around in scraps of like homemade clothes, animal skins. I'm like, this is boring. So my next series, Light Years, was at a military boarding school in space, but sort of a glamorous version. I sort of saw it as like Oxford meets West Point in space. So they have balls and they dress up. So I'd have to, describe all the outfits and the parties, which was so fun. But it was still in outer space, and I got so tired thinking about where is gravity coming from and the food source and like how are plants performing photosynthesis in the water. So when Danielle came to me with the idea for the Ravens, like, yes, a story set on Earth where people have electricity and cell phones and jeans and cars, and it was just so much fun to play in a magical version of our world. So it's really just a selfish decision for me.
I'm going to agree with Cass in that I got to go to Oz. I got to write a story at Oz. I got to write a story in the real world where I joined a sorority and have magic. I got to live in the Snow Queen land. I got to go and hang out with Aquaman. It's as a writer, you get to go to these other places you never go in your real life, and you get to do things you never would, and you get to take a bunch of kids along with you. So it's such a dream come true to get to create worlds and have people actually care to read them.
So I would sort of divide the question into two. Like one is about world building, and I think one is about character. It sort of seems like to me, at least that's kind of how I'm reading it. And in terms of world building, I feel like we have there's so much inspiration just in our current world in terms of our history and the history of all these places, and the mythology of all these places. I mean, you can drop into, Pakistani and South Asian mythology and write, for the rest of your life in that space, and you're never going to run out of things to write about. So I think it's maybe to some degree for me, it was just about understanding like how limitless the space is. And then in terms of characters and characteristics and storylines, for me, that was really just about thinking about change, character change, and sort of how characters change over the course of a book, and how that change can be different every time because we are constantly growing and changing as people, or at least I hope we are. And that's the type of character that I like to write about, as somebody who is growing. And so that's something that kind of allows me to never get sort of like Cass, like never get bored with what I'm writing. Like there's always something new that my characters are learning or experiencing, and then I'm sort of recording their responses to that. So that's how I'm able to kind of stay interested. And it really goes back to what Garth said, which I think was such a simply stated but wonderful way of thinking about it, which is like, I write books for myself. Like I want to write what I'm interested in. Like if I'm bored, then I'm like, this someone else is going to be bored if they read this. So I'm constantly trying to like keep myself interested in my stories, because that's the best way to make sure that other readers are too.
I think maybe adding on to that, or at least coming from that, you reminded me, Saba, that one of the main things for me is that, so every book I write, I really like a challenge. I really love to just challenge myself as much as I can when I'm writing a book with some new interesting thing. By the time I get to the book, I'm so exhausted by that challenge that I really need to not do that challenge again. But I wanted to get excited by another challenge, and also I make it sound as if I know what I'm getting into when I start writing a book, and I don't really. I end a book and I say, well, the next book isn't going to be like that in this way. And now I know not to do that, and the next book is going to be so much easier because I know not to do that. And then I, move into it, and it becomes its brand new, like, impossible nightmare challenge, which I love. But then get to the end of it and I'm like, okay, not doing that again. So there's maybe a little bit of a, like, trying to escape my own tireless ambition to challenge myself that continues, that causes the new kinds of books each after the other. I don't know. It's hard to talk about because I don't feel in control. So I don't feel in control of what's happening, so it's hard to explain it.
Yeah, I mean, I think my books, they reflect my obsessions and interests. That little grit in the oyster shell slowly aggregates other ideas and bits and pieces, and eventually becomes something that turns into a story. And it's always something that I want to read myself. And I just cross my fingers that it can be, it'll work for other readers as well. I mean, it's funny what you're saying, Kristen. I can't remember who said this, but maybe somebody else will. That you never actually know how to write a novel. You only know how you wrote the last one. So even if you've written,
I feel like Ursula Le Guin said that.
It feels like a Le Guin, and it would be her wisdom. She was very wise. But it's true. I've written lots and lots of books, and for the life of me, I can't say I know how to write a novel, and I particularly can't say it when I'm in the middle of it. Halfway through a novel, I always doubt myself enormously and think I've forgotten whatever it was that I used to know, and I've lost whatever ability I ever had, and I'm completely, this is terrible. And but I force myself to keep going, and I overcome that doubt, and I have it every time.
I think halfway through is the worst.
That Garth Nix thinks that. Like, I'm so comforted by that. So thanks, Garth.
I think everyone's like it.
He gets halfway through the book and he's like, I don't know what I'm doing.
I think the half point too can just be the worst time, because you've just been slogging for so long and there's still so much left to do, and you still are not sure it's a book.
Well, to be honest, it sometimes occurs at the 20% stage or the 80% stage as well. But finishing things, as everyone says, is so important. If you finish something, you've created possibility and potential, whereas if you don't finish it, then nothing can happen. So, but yeah, I always have those. Yeah, I mean, I always have those massive doubts, and almost everyone I know has them too. In fact, I'm deeply suspicious of the authors who claim to never doubt their work and just plow through. Present company, maybe someone here never doubts their work, in which case I take that back.
I think everybody doubts, and everyone thinks it, and it's never easier. Like, you think the next book's going to be easier, and it never is.
Okay, well, then that was our last question. I want to thank everybody so much for joining us, taking the time out of your day, and for those of us who have joined us from the future, we thank you. And also thank everybody for watching us. And I'm just, it's been such an amazing panel. Thank you so much. And we will see you all next year. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, everyone.